The throne hall of Ashenvale held its breath, and 1,000 wolves with it. Sifreni Marrow stood pressed against the cold marble of the western alcove, her serving tray clutched so tightly that her knuckles had gone white around the silver. From here, half hidden behind a tapestry depicting the first howl, she could see the entire ceremony unfolding without anyone seeing her. That was how it had always been. Sifreni was very good at being unseen. She had come to the royal castle 11 years ago as a thin orphan with hollow cheeks and no memory of the woman who had left her at the temple gates. The cook had taken pity. The housekeeper had taught her to read. By the time she was 16, she had risen as high as a girl of no blood ever could in the great house of an alpha king. She carried trays at official functions, refilled the goblets of nobles who never looked at her face, and slipped back into the shadows the moment her work was done. Tonight was the coronation affirmation. 3 years to the day since King Valoran Thorn had taken the Iron Crown, and tradition demanded he reaffirm his vows in the presence of the 7 noble houses. The hall was dressed in midnight blue and beaten silver. Frankincense smoke curled from braziers along the colonnade. 600 wolves stood in their human forms, draped in ceremonial furs, watching their king with the kind of devotion that bordered on worship. Sifreni watched him too. She had watched him for 11 years. It had started when she was 13. The young prince had been 17 then, all sharp jaw and quiet gray eyes, and he had passed her in a corridor without seeing her. That was fine. She did not expect to be seen. But that night she had lain awake in the servants' loft and replayed the brief moment he brushed past, and something inside her had quietly, secretly, irrevocably shifted. She had loved him from a distance ever since. It was the silliest thing in the world. A kitchen girl with calluses and a borrowed gray dress, harboring feelings for the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms. She had never spoken to him. He had never spoken to her. The closest they had ever come was the night of the solstice feast 2 winters ago, when she had set a flagon of mulled wine at his elbow, and his fingers had grazed hers for less than a heartbeat before she fled back into the kitchens. He had not noticed. He never noticed. And that was the natural order of things, and Sifreni had made her peace with it long ago. Tonight, the Alpha King would stand before the realm and finalize what every noble household had been whispering about for months. Lady Vesca Ardenholt of the Northern Reaches was to be acknowledged as his consort presumptive. The match had been arranged through 6 rounds of treaty negotiation. Vesca was beautiful in the cold, polished way of a sword's edge. Silver blonde hair coiled in northern braids, eyes the pale green of river ice. She stood now at the foot of the dais in a gown of pearl-stitched white, waiting for her king to descend and bestow the public token of his intent. Sifreni told herself she was not jealous. She had no right to jealousy. A girl who has never been seen cannot be replaced, because she was never there to begin with. And yet, her chest hurt. The High Lorekeeper raised his staff and struck the floor 3 times. The hall fell silent. Valoran Thorn, Alpha King of Ashenvale, blood of the Pale Mother and inheritor of the Iron Crown, you stand before your people on the 3rd anniversary of your reign. Speak your vow, and let the wolves of the realm bear witness. The king rose from his throne. Sifreni's breath caught against her will. He was every inch what a king should be. Tall, broad through the shoulders, dark hair cropped close at the sides and longer through the crown, a faint scar tracing the edge of his left jaw. He wore the ceremonial mantle of black wolf fur and the iron circlet that had crowned every alpha of his line for 200 years. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hall without apparent effort. I vow to the realm of Ashenvale, he began, to defend her borders, to honor her dead, to feed her hungry, and to... He stopped. The pause was so brief that most of the hall did not register it. A flicker, a half-breath, the kind of hitch a man might make if he had lost his place in a memorized speech. Then his head turned. Slowly, deliberately. Quiet gray eyes sweeping across the assembled crowd with the focused intensity of a hunter who had caught a scent. The hall shifted nervously. Lady Veska's smile faltered for the first time. The king's gaze passed over the noble houses, past the ambassadors, past the high lore-keeper. It moved along the western colonnade, slow and searching, and Sefreni felt the blood drain from her face as she understood with sudden, dreadful certainty that he was looking for someone. His eyes found her. She would have stepped backward, but the wall was already against her shoulders. She would have fled, but her legs had stopped working. The tapestry of the first howl hung at her left side, and the cold marble pressed at her back, and the silver tray was still clenched in her fingers, and the Alpha King of Ashenvale was staring at her from across a hall of 600 witnesses, as if she were the only person in the room. Something happened to his face. It was nothing dramatic. No widening of the eyes, no parting of the lips. Just a softening, deep and unmistakable, as if a long-held tension had finally released. As if he had been searching for something for a very long time and had, at last, found it. Then he stepped down from the dais. A murmur swept the hall. The high lore-keeper made a strangled sound of protest. Lady Veska's pale face went paler still. The Alpha King did not appear to hear any of them. He walked, with measured and absolute purpose, away from his throne, away from his consort presumptive, away from his own coronation vows, and across the long marble floor that separated him from the western alcove. Sefreni could not move, could not breathe. The tray slipped from her numb fingers and clattered against the stone, the sound echoing through a hall that had gone silent enough to hear a candle gutter. He stopped 3 paces from her. Up close, he was even more overwhelming than from a distance. She could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes, the faint stubble along his jaw, the rise and fall of his chest beneath the ceremonial mantle. He smelled of cedar smoke, and something deeper, something wild, something that made the wolf blood in her own thin lineage stir for the first time in her life. "What is your name?" he asked. His voice was quiet, private, as if the 600 witnesses had ceased to exist. Sefreni tried to speak and failed. Tried again. Sefreni, Your Majesty." "Sefreni," he repeated, and the way he said it made her knees weaken, slowly, carefully, as though he were testing the shape of something precious in his mouth. "Sefreni what?" "Marrow, my lord. I serve in the kitchens. I should not be—" "How long?" he said, ignoring her stammer entirely. "Have you worked in this castle?" 11 years, my lord." His jaw tightened. Something in his eyes flickered. Anger, but not at her. Never at her. At himself, perhaps. At the hall. At the 11 years. 11 years, he murmured. "And I never saw you." Behind him, the hall was beginning to recover from its shock. The high lore-keeper was striding toward the dais. Lady Veska had not moved from the foot of the steps, but her face had hardened from confusion into something colder. Whispers raced from pillar to pillar like wind through dry grass. The king did not turn. He reached out with his right hand and, before Sefreni could think to flinch, he laid his palm flat against the side of her throat. The contact was brief, almost reverent. His thumb brushed the line of her jaw and his eyes closed for a single instant as if he had been struck. When he opened them again, they were no longer gray. They were burning gold. "Mate," he said. Just the one word. Spoken so softly that only she could hear it. But she felt it land in the hall like a thrown stone, because somewhere behind him a noblewoman gasped, and someone else cursed, and Lady Veska Ardenholt made a sound that was almost a snarl. Sefreni's mind had gone completely white. "My lord," she whispered, I think there has been a mistake. I am no one. I have no house. I have no blood. I am only—" "You are mine," the Alpha King said. He said it as though it were a fact older than the stones of Ashenvale, as though the matter had been settled long before either of them had been born. Then he turned, with her trembling hand caught firmly in his own, and faced the hall. "I withdraw my vow," he announced, and his voice was no longer quiet. It rolled through the colonnade like thunder. There will be no consort presumptive named tonight. There will be no affirmation. The ceremony is suspended. The hall erupted. Lady Veska's father, the great northern warlord Holst Ardenholt, was already roaring across the marble with his hand on his ceremonial sword. The high lore keeper was shouting about precedent and law. Half the assembled nobles were on their feet, and the other half were too stunned to move. She understood only that her hand was inside the hand of the Alpha King, and his thumb was tracing slow circles against her wrist as if he could not quite believe she was real. Valoran. A new voice cut through the chaos. A tall woman in iron-gray robes had stepped onto the dais. The king's elder sister, Princess Asterin, regent during his minority and now the realm's most respected counselor. Her face was pale with controlled fury. "What in the name of the Pale Mother are you doing?" "What I should have done 11 years ago," the king answered without looking at her. "Clear the hall, Asterin. Now." "You cannot." "Clear the hall." His voice did not rise. It did not need to. The amber in his eyes deepened, and Princess Asterin closed her mouth. The guards began moving the assembled nobles toward the great doors. Lady Veska had to be physically led away by her father, her shoulders rigid and her eyes fixed on Sefreni, with a look that promised the matter was very far from settled. The king bent his head close to hers. His breath was warm against her temple. "Do not be afraid," he murmured. She made a sound that was almost a laugh, and almost a sob. "My lord, I have never been more afraid in my life." His mouth touched her hair. Just barely. "I know," he said. "I know, little one. But you are safe now. I swear it on the Iron Crown. You are safe, and you are mine. And I will not lose you." She did not yet understand the word lose. She did not understand why his hand was trembling as it held hers, or why the gold in his eyes had a sheen of grief, or why a king who had never seen her in 11 years should now look at her as if he had been searching for her across lifetimes. High in the rafters of the throne hall, where shadow gathered thickest between the ancient beams, a figure shifted its weight against the carved stone of a gargoyle. It had watched the entire ceremony unfold without moving. It had watched the king walk from his throne. It had watched the kitchen girl's hand disappear into the king's own. Now, very slowly, it withdrew a small black vial from a fold of its cloak and rolled it between gloved fingers. The plan would have to be moved forward. Tonight, if possible. The figure smiled behind its mask, and the smile did not reach its eyes. Sefreni had never been inside the king's private wing before. The corridor that led there was narrower than she had imagined, lit by hanging lanterns of frosted glass and lined with portraits of dead alphas who all seemed to stare at her as she passed. Her bare hand was still locked inside the king's. He had not let go since the moment in the alcove, and every time her fingers twitched as if to slip free, his grip tightened just enough to remind her that this was not a dream she could wake from. A pair of guards in dark plate fell into step behind them. Princess Asterin walked ahead, the iron-gray sweep of her robes whispering against the stone, and her silence was somehow louder than the chaos they had left behind. "Brother," Asterin said at last, without turning her head, "tell me you have not lost your mind." "I have not lost my mind." "Then explain to me, in words a reasonable woman might accept, why you abandoned your affirmation and your consort presumptive for a kitchen girl whose name you did not know 10 minutes ago." "She is my mate." The princess stopped walking. Sefreni felt her own legs lock up, and the king's arm drew her in close against the warmth of his side. Asterin turned slowly. Up close, her resemblance to her brother was startling. The same gray eyes, the same severe mouth, the same impossibly straight posture. But where Valoran's face had softened the moment he touched Sefreni's throat, his sister's face was a closed door. "That is not possible." "I am telling you, it is." "Valoran, the bonding sense does not skip over 11 years of proximity. You do not pass a true mate in a corridor 100 times and feel nothing. The sense is immediate. It is undeniable. It is. It is what just happened in that hall, he said quietly. Touch her hand if you need to confirm it. The bond is alight in me right now. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Asterin's gaze cut to Sophrene. It was not unkind. It was something worse, clinical, weighing, the look of a woman trying to solve a sum that did not balance. What is your lineage, girl? The princess asked. I do not know, Your Highness. I was left at the Temple of the Pale Mother. The priestesses said my mother was a traveler. They did not know her name. And your father? They never spoke of him. Asterin's mouth thinned. She turned back to her brother. We will talk about this in the morning, privately. After the 7 houses have stopped howling and Holst Ardenholt has been talked down from declaring blood feud on the throne. In the meantime, keep her in your wing. Do not let her wander. There are people in this castle tonight who will want her dead before the sun rises. She walked away without waiting for a reply. The king's hand tightened around Sophrene's, and she dared, for the first time, to look up at his face. He was watching her with an expression she did not know how to read. Tender, yes, but also haunted. Come, he said gently. There is a chamber where we can speak. You are shaking. She had not realized she was. The chamber he led her to was not a bedroom, for which she was grateful. It was a small private study off the king's solar. Book-lined, warm with the orange glow of a banked fire, smelling of old paper and cedar. He drew her to a velvet chair near the hearth and knelt in front of it. My lord. Valoran. My lord, please. I cannot call you that. You will. In time. His hand cupped her cheek with terrifying gentleness. Sophrene, look at me. Do you feel it? She did not need to ask what it was. There was a hum beneath her ribs. A low, warm thrum that had not been there an hour ago. It pulsed in time with something. Not her heart? Not exactly. Something that lived behind her heart, and every time the king's thumb stroked her cheek, the hum brightened. Yes, she whispered. That is the bond. It has been alive in me for some time. Tonight it became unbearable. I could not stand at that altar and swear myself to another woman while the bond was singing your name from somewhere in the building. I did not know it was you. I only knew it was here. So I looked. And then I saw you. My lord, I am no one. I am a kitchen girl. I do not have a drop of noble blood. The realm will tear itself apart over this. The realm will adjust. His voice was very calm. I am the Alpha King. The bond does not ask permission of bloodlines. Lady Vesca was a treaty. She was never a person to me. He paused. I am sorry that you had to witness it. There will be time to explain. For now, I need you to eat. And I need you to sleep. And I need you to trust that the room you slept in last night is no longer safe for you. Her stomach tightened. Why? He hesitated. For the first time since the alcove, the certainty in his face wavered. Because I have enemies who will move quickly now that they know what you are to me. And because there are things about this castle that I have not yet been able to... A sound at the door interrupted him. A polite cough. Then the soft clink of a tray being set down on the threshold. Your evening cordial, Majesty, said a voice from the corridor. And refreshment for the lady, as Princess Asterin instructed. Valoran did not turn. His eyes stayed fixed on Sophrene's face, but his shoulders had gone subtly still. Leave it, Hadric. Thank you. Of course, Majesty. Footsteps retreated. The king crossed to the door, brought the tray inside himself, and set it on a low table between them. 2 cups of dark wine, a small plate of honey cakes, a bowl of late autumn pears. He picked up one of the cups, held it for a long moment without drinking. Then, very deliberately, he poured the contents into the fire. The flames flared green for half a heartbeat before settling back to orange. A faint, sour smell, Something like crushed almonds left too long in vinegar, curled into the air and faded. Sophreni's hand had flown to her mouth. Vale's breath, the king murmured. I expected something cruder. They are getting bolder. That was poison. That was poison, yes. Someone in this castle just tried to kill you, little one, not me. I have not had a cordial brought to me at this hour in 3 years. They knew I would offer it to you. Hadric, she whispered. He brought it. Yes. And I will know, before the night is out, whether he poured it himself or was given it by another hand. He has served my chambers since I was a boy. I am not yet ready to believe him a murderer, but I am ready to investigate him as one. The king's jaw tightened. Either way, he will not bring another tray to this wing until I am satisfied. Sophreni nodded numbly. The king knelt in front of her again. He took her hands out of her lap and folded them between his own. Listen to me, he said. There is a faction in this castle that has been working against me for a long time. Tonight I gave them a target they did not have before. I will not lie to you. The next days will be dangerous. But I swear to you on every drop of blood in my body that no one in this realm will touch you while I draw breath. She nodded. She could not speak. I am going to send for my second. His name is Corvin Vask. You can trust him as you would trust me. He will arrange for guards at this door and for a chamber to be prepared for you within my own wing, where the wards are strongest. I do not have anything, she whispered. My things are in the loft above the kitchens. A book, a comb. My mother's. The only thing I have of my mother's. Tell me what it is. I will have it brought to you. A pendant. Small. A silver disc with a crescent moon carved into it. The king went very still. He did not let go of her hands, but something passed across his face that she had not seen before. A quick, sharp recognition that was gone again, before she could be sure she had seen it. How is the moon shaped? Lying on its back, with 3 small notches along the curve. A long silence. Valoran, she said, and the use of his name surprised her almost as much as it seemed to surprise him. He brought her hands up to his mouth and pressed his lips against her knuckles, and when he lowered them again, his eyes were wet. I will have it brought to you, he said quietly. Tonight. He rose. He crossed to the door and spoke briefly to a guard in tones too low for her to catch. When he returned, his face had been carefully arranged back into composure, but the haunting was deeper in his eyes than before. He did not tell her what the pendant meant. She did not yet know how to ask. 3 hours later, Sophreni was alone in a small bedchamber that had been hastily prepared inside the royal wing. 2 guards stood outside her door. A fire burned in the hearth. The bed was wider than the entire loft she had slept in for 11 years. Someone had brought her a clean nightdress of soft cream wool, and her own meager bundle of belongings had been delivered by a young page who would not meet her eyes. She had not slept. She had not even tried. She sat on the edge of the bed in the unfamiliar nightdress, the pendant clutched in her palm, watching the fire. The hum behind her ribs had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger as the hours passed. A soft sound at the window made her head turn. It was nothing. The wind, perhaps. The royal wing was 4 stories above the courtyard, and the window was leaded glass set into thick stone. No one could possibly... The sound came again. A scrape. Faint. Deliberate. Sophreni rose from the bed and crossed slowly toward the window. Her breath fogged faintly in front of her. The fire was warm at her back, but the air near the glass had gone cold. She drew the curtain aside. For a long moment she saw only her own pale reflection. Then her reflection moved when she had not. A hand pressed against the outside of the glass. Black-gloved, long-fingered, steady as a held breath. Sophreni stumbled backward. The pendant fell from her fist and bounced against the stone floor with a small, bright sound. Her mouth opened to scream for the guards, but no sound came out. The figure on the other side of the glass tilted its head. It was wearing a mask. Smooth, pale, carved in the shape of a wolf's skull. Through the eye holes, two flat dark eyes regarded her with patient, terrible calm. Then the figure raised its other hand. It was holding a silver pendant. Not hers. Hers was on the floor at her feet, but another one, identical in every way, held up to the glass between them as if to say, "I know what you are. I know what you were never told." The figure's masked head tilted further, and then, slow and deliberate, it dragged a single gloved finger across its own throat in a horizontal line. Sifreni found her voice. The scream tore out of her so loud that the guards crashed through the door before it had even finished, swords drawn, shouting her name. But by the time they reached the window, the figure was gone, and there was nothing on the cold leaded glass but the faint ghost of a handprint that faded as she watched. The night Sifreni ran from the castle of Ashenvale, the snow was falling so thickly that it erased her footprints before she had finished making them. She would think, later, that this was the only mercy the world had granted her in those hours. She had nothing else. No plan, no provisions, no map, no clear thought beyond the single sentence circling her mind like a wolf at the edge of a fire. "They will kill him to get to you." The note had come at dawn. It had been slipped under her door sometime in the dead hours after the masked figure at the window. The guards had sworn no one had passed them. The note bore no seal. It was written in a thin, careful hand on a square of parchment so old it had cracked at the folds. "Kitchen girl, the pendant you carry is a death warrant. The crescent line was supposed to die with your mother. The masked watcher at your window will not be the last. We can let you live, or we can let the king live. We cannot let both. If you remain in this castle by sundown tomorrow, the Alpha King will be dead before the next moon. If you leave, alone and silent, he will be allowed to forget you. The bond will fade. He will live. Choose. A friend of the realm." She had read it 3 times. She had burned it in the hearth. And then she had sat very still on the floor in front of the fire for an hour, while the bond hummed warmly inside her chest, and the king slept somewhere on the other side of a stone wall, unaware that someone had walked freely into the most heavily warded wing of his castle and slipped a death sentence beneath his mate's door. She had believed the note, every word of it, because the masked figure at the window had been holding her mother's pendant, and that meant whoever was hunting her had known about her line, known about a line she herself had not known existed, for longer than she had been alive. Whoever they were, they had already killed her mother. They could kill a king. So Sifren had risen from the floor, dressed herself in the plain gray traveling cloak the housekeeper had once given her for winter errands, tied the silver pendant tight beneath her bodice, and wrapped the king's iron crown ring, left forgotten on her bedside table when he had pressed it into her palm hours earlier, and told her to keep it close, in a square of linen, and tucked it deep into an inner pocket. She had not been able to make herself leave it behind. It was the only piece of him she could carry. Then she had walked, in full daylight and in plain sight, out through the kitchens she had served in for 11 years. No one had stopped her. No one had ever stopped a kitchen girl going about her business. She had carried an empty basket as a pretext, and she had nodded to the gate guards as if she were running an errand for the cook, and the gate guards had nodded back without looking at her face. 11 years of being invisible, she had thought as the postern gate clanged shut behind her, and at last, the gift of it. She had walked until the city was behind her, then the suburbs, then the cleared farmland. By the time the snow had begun to fall in earnest, she was past the last shepherd's hut and into the dark line of the old pine wood, and the bond inside her chest had gone from a warm hum to a deep, aching pull that grew worse with every step she put between herself and her king. She walked anyway. She walked through the night, and through the day after, and through the night after that. She slept for a few hours at a time in hollows beneath fallen trees. She ate the last of the bread she had stolen from the kitchen larder. She drank from streams. She did not cry. She had decided in the first hour outside the city walls that crying was a luxury she could no longer afford. On the seventh day, she stumbled half-dead into the village of Hollowmere. Hollowmere was not on any official map. It was a day's hard walk from the nearest road, tucked into a fold of hills where two streams met to form a shallow river. 40 houses, a mill house, a tavern with no name, a smithy, and a stone shrine to the pale mother that had been there since before anyone alive could remember. The villagers were hillfolk. They asked few questions. They had not turned in a runaway to the crown in 9 generations. A woman named Mother Indra had taken Sofreni in. Mother Indra was the village's herbwoman, too old to be called a midwife anymore, though she still attended the difficult births. She had a face like a winter apple and hands like roots, and she had looked at Sofreni shivering on her doorstep for exactly 3 seconds before saying, "Inside, child, you are turning blue." Sofreni had given the false name Wren Ashby. She had said her husband had died of fever and her in-laws had turned her out. Mother Indra had nodded slowly, the way a woman nods at a story she does not believe but does not intend to challenge, and had set a bowl of barley soup in front of her and told her to eat. That had been 4 months ago. 4 months in which the snow had given way to a slow, wet spring, in which Sofreni had learned to grind willow bark for fevers and steep raspberry leaf for women in their last weeks of pregnancy, and pack a wound with yarrow. 4 months in which she had become, quietly and without announcement, the village's second herbwoman. Mother Indra had taken to calling her Wren girl with the same gruff affection she used for her cat. 4 months in which the bond inside Sofreni had not faded. The note had promised it would. He will be allowed to forget you. The bond will fade. And she had believed it because she had wanted to believe it. Because if the bond faded, he would live. And that was the only thing that mattered. It had not dimmed. If anything, it had grown worse. There were nights, most nights, when she lay awake on her narrow pallet in Mother Indra's loft and felt it pull at her like a hook beneath her breastbone, dragging westward toward Ashenvale, toward him. There were dawns when she woke gasping with the certainty that he had been reaching for her in her sleep. There were moments, while she was grinding herbs at Mother Indra's table or carrying water from the stream, when she would feel a sudden surge of warmth from within, sharp and unmistakable, as if somewhere very far away the king had thought of her, and the thought had crossed the distance between them like a struck bell. He had not forgotten her. The note had lied. Or, and this thought was worse, the note had told the truth, as its writer understood it, and the writer had not understood that the bond between Sofreni and Valoren was not the kind of bond that faded. The crescent line, the masked figure at the window, the mother she had never known. There was something in her blood, something the conspirators had wanted dead 2 decades ago, and that something was tied up in why the king's bond to her had ignited the moment he laid eyes on her after 11 years of looking through her. She did not understand it. She had no one to ask. She had only Mother Indra, who watched her sometimes across the herb table with a thoughtful, careful expression that made Sofreni suspect the old woman had guessed more than she said. The pendant stayed beneath her bodice. The king's ring stayed in a small carved box under a loose floorboard in the loft. She took it out at night, sometimes, when the loneliness was too much, and held it in her palm until the iron warmed against her skin. On a soft evening in early spring, with the snow finally gone from the lower fields and the first crocuses pushing up along the riverbank, Sofreni was kneeling in Mother Indra's herb garden, thinning the new shoots of feverfew, when a sound she had not heard in 4 months froze her in place. Hooves, not the steady plod of a farmer's mule, not the heavy step of a draft horse, a rider's gait. Fast, controlled, the rhythm of a long-legged war horse moving at a careful trot. Visitors did not come to Hollowmere on war horses. She rose slowly, brushing dirt from her apron, and made her way around the side of Mother Indra's cottage to where the path met the village green. The pull beneath her ribs had begun to do something it had never done before. Not pull, not ache, but warn. A low, tight, urgent note, like a string being tuned too high. the rider was already in the village. He was a single man on a tall gray gelding, traveling cloak thrown back, the dust of 3 days' hard ride caked along his boots. He was tall and broad through the shoulders, with iron-streaked dark hair pulled back from a hard-boned face, and he wore the kind of leather and steel that did not belong on any traveler in this part of the country. A long sword hung at his hip. A second blade, shorter, curved, rode at the small of his back. Sefreni stepped back behind the corner of the cottage. Her heart had begun to hammer so hard she thought he must hear it from the green. She knew this man. She had only seen him twice, both times at a distance, both times on the periphery of the king's small council. He had been pointed out to her once by one of the senior kitchen maids, who had said his name with the kind of hush usually reserved for storms. Corvin Vask, the king's second. The Black Hand of Ashenvale. The man Valoran had said, on the night everything fell apart. You can trust him as you would trust me. And he was here, in Hollowmere. Because Corvin Vask had not come this far, alone, on a warhorse, for nothing. He had come for her. The blacksmith's son was pointing toward Mother Indra's cottage. Corvin Vask turned in the saddle and his eyes, pale, the color of river ice, found Sefren where she stood frozen at the corner of the cottage wall. He did not draw his sword. He did not shout. He simply slid down from his horse, very slowly, and walked across the green toward her with both empty hands held loose at his sides. 3 paces away, he stopped. "My lady," he said quietly. The pull beneath her ribs was screaming now. "You should not be here," she whispered. "How did you find me?" With great difficulty. His voice was low and steady. "And not a moment too soon. There is a great deal you do not know, my lady. Some of it is going to hurt." He paused. "And before I tell you any of it, you should know that 2 riders with wolf skull masks crossed the river ford 8 miles south of here at dusk yesterday, and they are coming this way." The world tilted. Sefreni reached out blindly and steadied herself against the cottage wall. "They followed me?" she breathed. "After 4 months. They have always known where you were, my lady." Corvin Vask's pale eyes held hers without blinking. "They have been watching you the entire time. They were waiting for the king to find you first, so that they could kill you both at once." Mother Indra took one look at the man standing in her herb garden and reached for the iron poker beside the door. "Who?" she said flatly. "Is this?" Corvin Vask did not move. He had been a soldier long enough to know that a small old woman with a poker and a careful eye was a far more dangerous thing than most armed men, and he kept his hands open at his sides. "Mother," Sefreni said, and her voice came out cracked. He is from where I came from. He means me no harm." "Does he?" "I swear it." The old woman's gray eyes moved from Vask to Sefreni and back again. "Wren girl, look at me." Sefreni looked. "Is that the truth?" "Yes." Mother Indra let out a long breath through her nose, but she did not put the poker down. "Inside, both of you. Whatever you came to say, soldier, you will not say it on my doorstep where every gossip in Hollowmere can watch you say it. Inside. Now." Vask inclined his head once, with a respect Sefreni had not expected, and followed them into the cottage. The single room smelled of drying mint and wood smoke. Mother Indra closed the heavy door, drew the bolt, and pulled the shutters across both narrow windows. Only then did she set the poker against the wall. Within arm's reach, Sefreni noticed, not on its hook. "Speak," the old woman said. Vask looked at Sefreni. "Mother Indra," Sefreni said quietly, "I told you my husband was dead. You told me a great many things, Wren girl. I believed about half of them. He is not dead." The old woman's expression did not change. "I had guessed. He is the Alpha King." A long silence. Mother Indra walked slowly to the wooden chair beside the hearth and sat down. She placed her gnarled hands flat on her knees. She looked at the fire for a moment, and then she looked at Sefreni, and her face had gone soft in a way Sofreni had never seen before. "Child," she said, "sit down." "Mother, sit down." Sofreni sat. "Now you, soldier." Mother Indra gestured to the bench across the table. "Sit. And explain to my Wren girl why 2 months ago a man came through this village asking after a dark-haired stranger with a silver pendant, and why I told him she had moved on to the coast, and why he believed me." Vask's pale eyes flicked to her with something that was almost a smile. "That was you?" "It was me. Mother Indra," he said quietly. "You may have saved her life." "I had guessed that as well." The old woman's gaze returned to Sofreni. "Wren girl, listen. Whatever this man is about to say, I want you to remember 3 things. 1. You are still under my roof. And no one in this village will let harm come to you while you are. 2. Whatever choice you must make, you make it with a clear head and not a frightened one. 3. Her voice softened. "I have known you 4 months, child, and you are the kindest soul that has ever crossed my threshold. Whatever blood is in you, it is good blood. Do not let any man tell you otherwise." Sofreni could not answer. Her throat had closed. Mother Indra nodded once, briskly, and turned back to Vask. "Now, speak, and speak plainly." Vask placed both hands flat on the table. "My lady," he said, "the king is alive." Sofreni's eyes closed. The relief that went through her was so complete that for a moment she thought she might fall sideways off the bench. She had not allowed herself, in 4 months, to fully consider the alternative. He was alive. He was alive. "He has not slept in 4 months," Vask continued, and the relief curdled. "He has not eaten more than a soldier's ration in weeks. He has burned through 3 of his own counselors who tried to tell him to take Lady Veska as consort and stop the search. The realm is fraying around him. The northern houses are threatening secession. The Ardenholt line has formally withdrawn from the council. There are factions in the city who whisper that the king has gone mad, and there are factions who whisper that the king is right to refuse a false consort, and the 2 factions are starting to draw blades on each other in the market streets. He is searching for me? My lady. The king has spoken of nothing else. He has had every district of the capital combed 3 times. He has sent riders to every village within 10 days' ride. He has not been able to track you because the bond went strange the night you left. It was as if someone had thrown a cloth over it. He could feel that you were alive. He could not feel where. He has been half mad with the not knowing." "A cloth over it," Mother Indra murmured. "Interesting." Vask glanced at her. "You know something of bonds, Mother?" "I know something of bloodlines, soldier. They are not entirely different things." Her eyes had narrowed thoughtfully. "Go on." "The king sent me," Vask said, returning to Sofreni, 2 weeks ago, after we intercepted a letter. He drew a folded square of parchment from the inside of his leather jerkin and laid it on the table. Sofreni stared at it. She did not pick it up. "Read it to me, please." Vask unfolded the parchment. "It is short," he said. "The seal is broken. We do not know who sent it. We know who received it. A man in our city watch who we have since taken into custody. The letter reads, 'The Crescent Witch is in Hollowmere. The herb woman shelters her. 2 riders dispatched. Resolution before the next new moon. The king's bond will sever when she dies, and his grief will finish what the bond began. Long live a quiet realm.'" The fire cracked. Sofreni could not feel her hands. "They do not just want me dead," she whispered. "They want him to die of grief. They want the bond itself to kill him." "Yes, my lady. That is not possible. A mate bond cannot kill its survivor. It is a wound. Not a... It is possible," Mother Indra said quietly. "For a crescent bond. Yes." Both of them turned to her. The old woman was looking at her hands. "Mother," Sofreni said. "Mother, what are you not telling me?" Mother Indra was silent for a long moment. Then she rose, slowly, and crossed to a small cedar chest beneath her sleeping pallet. She lifted the lid. She drew out something wrapped in black cloth. She brought it back to the table and unwrapped it. It was a silver pendant, the same as Sophreni's. Sophreni made a small sound she did not mean to make. "I had a sister," Mother Indra said. Her voice was very steady. "Younger than me by 12 years. Her name was Lirayan Crescent. She was extraordinary. We were the last two daughters of a line that the priestesses of the Pale Mother had been quietly protecting for 9 generations. Our line could not shift, child. Not the way the noble wolves shift. We were something older. Something that the very first wolves had been afraid of, in the first days, when the Pale Mother walked the world. The crescent line carried the seeing, the mate true sight. We could look at any wolf in any room and know whether the bond inside them was true or false, whether their mate was alive, whether their mate was near. We could see, in a moment of mortal peril, the shape of every threat in a room and the path through it. The realm tolerated us once when the first kings needed us to validate their consorts. The realm hunted us, later, when the noble houses realized we could expose every political marriage as a lie. Sophreni could not breathe. "My sister Lirayan," Mother Indra said, "ran from the temple where we had been hidden when she was 19. She had fallen in love with a traveling musician. She was foolish, and she was brave, and she was very, very young. She wrote me one letter. 2 years later, she said she had a daughter. She said she had named her Sophreni, after a star. She said the child had the seeing already, even as a babe, and small lights gathered at her fingertips when she was frightened. She said she was being followed. She said that if anything happened to her, she had given the child her pendant, and the pendant would find its way to me one day, if the world was kind." The old woman's hand was trembling now. The world was not kind. The next letter I had was from a temple priestess, who told me my sister had been killed on a road, and that the child was missing. I searched, child. I searched for 3 years. I never found you. I made my peace with the loss as best I could, and I came to this small village and I lived a small life, and I forgot, almost, that I had once had a sister. Mother Indra raised her eyes. And then, 4 months ago, a half-frozen girl with my sister's face stumbled to my door. Sophreni could not see. The cottage had blurred. "I am sorry, child," the old woman whispered. "I should have told you the night you arrived. I knew within an hour of looking at you. I told myself I would tell you when you were stronger. The truth is, I was a coward. I had lost her once. I could not bear to lose you the same way by sending you running again." "Aunt," Sophreni breathed. The word came out before she had thought it. Mother Indra's face crumpled just for a moment before she gathered it back together. "Yes," she said. "Aunt. If you will have me." Vask had gone very still on his bench, watching this with the controlled stillness of a man who understood he was witnessing something he had no right to interrupt. After a long moment, he spoke quietly. "My lady, I am sorry. I would not break this for the world. But there are 2 riders coming, and we have less time than I had hoped." Sophreni wiped her face with the back of her hand. "How long?" "They crossed the ford last night. If they are riding at the pace I would expect, they will reach Hollowmere by the middle hours after dark tonight. 3 hours. Perhaps 4. No more." "And the king?" "My king is half a day's hard ride behind me, at the head of 30 wolves of his personal guard. I rode ahead alone to make the final approach quietly, but they have been following my path all the way from the capital and they will not be slowed by it. He has driven them past the limits of horseflesh to keep pace. He should be at the edge of the pinewood by midnight. With luck, he will reach this village before the masked riders do. Without luck, he will not. And if he does not, then we hold the cottage until he does." Mother Indra rose from her chair. She did not sit back down. She walked to the door, drew the bolt back, opened it a careful inch, and looked out into the village green for a long moment. Then she closed the door again, slid the bolt home, and turned around. "I will rouse the village," she said, quietly. "The smith has 3 sons and a war axe his grandfather brought back from the southern campaigns. The miller's wife was a campaigner herself before she settled here, and she still has her bow. We are 40 houses, soldier, and we have not turned in a runaway in 9 generations. Mother Indra, save your courtesies, tell me where you want them placed." Vask looked at her for a long moment, and then, slowly, the something that was almost a smile crossed his hard face for real. "At the 4 approaches to the village, 2 at each, hidden. They are not to engage, they are only to give warning. The masked killers who serve our enemies have done worse things than kill in single combat. They poison the wells they ride past. They burn the homes of the people who shelter their targets. Understood? And mother, I will need an upper window of this cottage, with a clear line down the green. Take the loft. There is a shutter that opens north. I will bring you my sister's bow." She went to the cedar chest again and lifted out a long bundle wrapped in oiled cloth. She handed it to Vask, and he took it with both hands as if it were heavier than it should be. "Lirins?" he asked quietly. "Lirins?" Vask bowed his head once. "Wren girl," Mother Indra said. "Sefren, I am going now. Bolt the door behind me. Do not open it for anyone but the soldier or the king. Anyone. Aunt. I will be back. I am not so easily lost as my sister. Bolt the door." Then she was out the door and into the dusk. Sefreni bolted the door and turned around. Corvin Vask was watching her from across the table, the wrapped bow across his knees, his pale eyes steady. The fire cracked. "My lady," Vask said gently, "there is one more thing. Tell me. The note that was slipped under your door, the night you fled. The king found fragments of it in the ashes of your hearth. Enough to read what it had told you. He understood why you ran." Vask paused. "He wanted me to tell you, when I found you, that you did the right thing. That if it had been him, he would have run too. That he is not angry. That he has never been angry." Sefreni pressed her hand against her mouth. "He wanted me to tell you," Vask continued more quietly, "that the bond did not fade. That every night of those 4 months, it pulled west toward you, and he followed it as far as he could. And the only thing that kept him on his feet was knowing that the pull was still there, which meant you were still alive. He wanted me to tell you that he is coming, that whatever you find when he reaches you, he is not the same man who walked across the throne hall to find you in the western alcove. He has been broken open by these months. He may not look the way you remember." "Tell me how he looks," she whispered. Vask hesitated. "Thinner," he said. "Older. The gold has not fully left his eyes since the night you disappeared. He has not let anyone touch him. He sleeps, when he sleeps at all, on the floor of the chamber where you were the last time he saw you. The kitchen women bring him food and take it back untouched. He has not laughed since you left. He has barely spoken, except to give orders. The kingdom has been governed for 4 months by a man who is one long howl with a crown on top of it." Sefreni sat down heavily on the bench. "My lady, you should know what is coming for you. He loves you. I have served the Thorn line for 26 years, and I have never seen any wolf love anything the way my king loves you. You are about to be loved very hard by a man who has been starving for 4 months. It will not be gentle. He will weep. He will not be able to let go of you. I am telling you so that when it happens you will know it is grief and not wildness, and you will know that the grief will pass. And the man underneath it is the same man you walked the corridor with on the night of the affirmation." Sefreni nodded. She could not speak. A horn sounded in the distance, 2 short blasts, then a third. Vask was on his feet before the third blast finished, the wrapped bow already in his hand, the curved blade at the small of his back already half drawn. "They are here," he said. "Earlier than I thought. To the loft, my lady. Stay low. Do not come out." A heartbeat later, an arrow shattered through the shutter of the western window in a spray of splintered wood, and embedded itself quivering in the wall above the hearth. The dark fletching gleamed wetly in the firelight. Poison. The arrow had not finished trembling before Vask was across the room. He moved with a controlled efficiency Sofreni had never seen in a human being. He kicked the cottage table over onto its side in a single motion, dragged her behind it by the elbow, pressed the wrapped bow into her hands, and was at the loft ladder before the second arrow came through the shutter and embedded itself 2 finger widths from where her head had been a heartbeat before. "Stay down," he said. "Whatever happens, do not stand up." He went up the ladder in 3 pulls and was gone into the loft. Sifren crouched behind the overturned table with the wrapped bow across her knees. The hum within her had gone from a steady pull to a hot, sharp blade. "He is close. He is close. He is so close. Please let him be close enough." Somewhere outside, in the falling dark beyond the shutters, she heard the first scream. Not a villager's scream, a horse's scream, high and terrible, cut short. Then the second horn blast, then shouting. Then the dry, unmistakable crack of a smith's axe meeting bone. Sofreni pressed herself flat against the floor. Above her in the loft, the north shutter banged open, and Vask's voice came down soft and urgent. "Stay where you are, my lady. 3 on horseback, 2 on foot. The smith has engaged the foot soldiers. The horsemen are circling toward us." "How many?" "5 total. I can take 2 from up here before they reach the door. The other 3. His voice broke off. The bowstring sang above her, a clean, deep note, and a horse shrieked somewhere on the green. "1," Vask said. Another note, another shriek. This one a man's. 2. A heavy thud against the cottage door. "My lady, down." The door splintered inward. Sofreni flattened herself against the floor as the cottage filled with the sound of breaking wood, and the cold air rushed in from outside. She could see, through the gap between the upturned table and the floor, a pair of black boots step across the threshold, then a second pair, then a third. "The girl," a man's voice said, cold, ordinary, the voice of a clerk, not a killer. "Find the girl, burn the rest." "And the soldier in the loft?" "Smoke him out, burn it all." Sofreni's hand closed around the wrapped bow on her knees. She had never, in her entire life, drawn a bowstring. She unwrapped the bow anyway. Beneath the oiled cloth was a long bow of pale yellow yew, polished smooth by decades of handling, the grip wound in worn black leather. 6 arrows lay alongside it, fletched in white. Liran's bow, her mother's bow. Something inside her chest opened. It was not a pull. It was not a hum. It was a brilliant, vast golden pressure, and for one impossible second Sofreni saw, actually saw, the inside of the cottage as if from a great height. She saw the 3 masked men. She saw the angles of their bodies, the gaps between their shoulder plates, the soft place at the side of the neck where a curved piece of armor did not quite meet a leather collar. She saw, with absolute clarity, where each man would be a half second from now. The mate true sight. The crescent seeing. It was not just for bonds. In a moment of mortal danger, with her mother's bow in her hand and her aunt's blood awake in her veins, the gift showed her everything at once. And in that same instant she felt the small lights gather at her fingertips, the lights her mother had written about in the only letter she had ever sent. They were faint, almost shy. They danced once across her knuckles and were gone. Sofreni knocked an arrow. She had never done it before. Her hands knew how anyway. She rose from behind the table. The first masked man saw her come up. His head turned. He was already lifting a crossbow. He did not finish lifting it. Her arrow went through the soft place at the side of his neck, exactly where the gift had shown her it would, and he went down without making a sound. The second man shouted and moved. Sofreni knocked again. Drew. Released. Through the eye slit of his mask. The third man was the one who had spoken in the clerk's voice. He was also the fastest. He was already at the table. He had drawn a long, curved knife. He came over the edge of the upturned table at her with the knife raised, and Sifreni had time to knock a third arrow but not to draw it. A bowstring sang from the loft above her. The man with the knife pitched forward across the table and lay still, an arrow in the back of his neck. Silence. Sifreni stood with the bow in her hands and the third arrow still held against the string and her chest heaving, and somewhere very far away she registered that she had just killed 2 men, and she did not have the room inside her to think about it yet. Vas came down the ladder in a fast slide. He took the bow from her hands gently and pried the unfired arrow from her stiff fingers and set them both on the overturned table. "My lady," he said, and his pale eyes were strange. "How did you—" "I do not know. That was not a kitchen girl's shooting. I do not know." He nodded slowly. He did not press her. "Outside," he said. "2 more. The smith is wounded. The miller's wife is down. Mother Indra. Where is she?" "I do not know." Sifreni ran for the door before he could stop her. The village green was lit by the orange glow of a thatched roof on fire. The mill house. She registered numbly. The mill house was burning. The smith was on his knees beside the well with a long gash along his forearm, his 3 sons standing in a tight ring around him with their axes raised. The miller's wife lay on her side near the shrine to the pale mother, and she was breathing, but the arrow in her thigh was deep. 2 horsemen still circled the green. One had a crossbow. One had a long sword and a shield. They were waiting. Sifreni realized with a slow, cold understanding that they were waiting for her. She had drawn herself out. They were already turning. "My lady, back." Vask was beside her with his bow up. His arrow took the crossbowman through the chest. The man fell from his saddle in a heavy, ugly slide. The swordsman turned his horse and charged. He was fast. The gift showed Sifreni he would reach them in 5 heartbeats. She also saw, with the same brutal clarity, that Vask had not had time to knock another arrow, and that the swordsman's blade was angled to take Vask through the shoulder and out the back, and that there was nothing she could do about any of it, because she had no second weapon. 5 heartbeats. The bond inside her chest exploded. It was not a pull. It was not a hum. It was the sensation of a great door being thrown open inside her, and something massive on the other side of it. Something that had been pressing against the door for 4 long months. Finally coming through. A wolf the size of a pony came out of the dark at the edge of the green at full charge. It hit the swordsman's horse broadside. Horse and rider went down in a tangle of legs and screaming. The wolf was on top of them before they had finished falling. Its jaws closed on the swordsman's throat, and the screaming stopped, and the wolf raised its head from the killed man and turned, slowly, toward Sifreni. Its fur was the color of old ash. Its eyes were burning gold. Its chest was matted dark with blood that was not its own. It stood in the middle of the green with the mud steaming around its paws and the firelight from the burning mill catching in its eyes, and Sifreni knew it the way she knew her own name. "Valoran," she breathed. The wolf walked toward her, slowly, each step deliberate, as if it did not quite trust the ground beneath it. As if, after 4 months of running through forests and ravines and across rivers, it could not entirely believe that the woman in front of it was not another dream. Behind it, riders were emerging from the trees at the south edge of the green. Wolves of the king's personal guard, in human form on horseback, in full battle leather. They were already fanning out across the village, checking the fallen, lifting the wounded, calling for the village's healer. But Sifreni did not see any of them. She saw only the ash-gray wolf walking toward her across the bloody green. It stopped 2 paces from her. It lowered its great head. Then it shifted. The shift was not violent the way the stories suggested. It was a slow, golden unfolding, fur receding into skin, paws lengthening into hands, the great frame compressing into the shape of a man kneeling in the mud at her feet. He was naked except for the iron crown ring on a chain around his neck. He was thinner than the books said an Alpha King should ever be allowed to become. His ribs showed. There was a long, half-healed gash along his left shoulder, the kind a man takes when he stops bothering to defend himself. His dark hair had grown out unkempt to his collarbone. His face had hollowed under the cheekbones in a way that made him look 10 years older than he was. He did not stand up. He stayed on his knees in the mud at her feet, his hands resting on his thighs, his head bowed, and his shoulders began to shake. "Valoran," she whispered. "Do not," he said. His voice came out hoarse, broken. "Do not call me that yet. I cannot. I am not. Give me a moment. I am not ready to be the king again. Not yet." She dropped to her knees in front of him in the cold mud. She put her hands on either side of his hollowed face and tilted it up so that he had to look at her. And his gold eyes were full of tears and wild with something she did not have a word for. Something between worship and wreckage. And she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, and felt his whole body shudder. "I am here," she said. "I am here, my lord. I am here." His arms came around her then, and they did not so much embrace her as collapse around her, and he buried his face in the side of her neck, and made a sound that was not entirely a human sound, and Sifreni held the Alpha King of Ashenvale together with her two thin arms while he wept against her throat in the middle of a burning village. They moved him into Mother Indra's cottage because there was nowhere else to take him. A guard threw a heavy traveling cloak around his shoulders before they crossed the threshold. Mother Indra, who was alive, who had been hidden in the smith's root cellar throughout the entire battle, who had emerged into the chaos with mud on her skirts and Lirayan's name on her lips, lit every lamp in the cottage and stoked the fire to a roar. She set water boiling. She brought a basin and clean cloths. She did all of it without speaking. She left them, finally, with a quiet hand on Sifreni's shoulder. "I will be at the smith's. Tend your wolf, wren girl. I will see you in the morning." The door clicked shut behind her. Valoran was sitting on the bench by the table, the cloak loose around his shoulders, his eyes fixed on Sifreni as if she might evaporate if he looked away. Sifreni knelt in front of the bench and dipped a clean cloth in the warm basin. "Let me," she said quietly. "Sifreni. Please. Let me." He let her. She washed his face first, the dried tears, the streaks of mud, the dark crust of someone else's blood along his jaw. Then his throat. Then his hands. Those hard, broad hands that had held the Iron Crown for 3 years and had been clenched into fists for 4 months, and that now lay open and trembling on his knees because she was the one holding them. She washed the gash along his shoulder last, with a poultice from Mother Indra's shelf that smelled of yarrow and pine. When she was done, she set the basin aside and sat back on her heels and looked up at him. "You came for me," she said. "I would have torn the world apart for one more day." "I know. Sifreni, I know. Vask told me." "He could not have told you all of it." "He told me enough." She paused. "Valoran, I need to say something, before either of us says anything else." He nodded once. His throat worked. "I am sorry," she said. "I am sorry that I ran. I am sorry that I believed the note. I am sorry I did not trust you enough to come to you with it instead of running into the snow alone. I had 4 months to think about that, and every day of those 4 months I knew, somewhere in my chest, that I had made the wrong choice. I knew it because the bond did not fade. It only got worse. And every night I thought, if I had only knocked on his door and shown him the note. If I had only believed that he was strong enough to protect me, without me having to disappear to do it for him." Valoran closed his eyes. When he opened them, the gold had softened to something quieter, something almost amber. "My love," he said. "Listen to me carefully because I will not say this twice." He slid off the bench. He knelt in front of her, mirroring her posture, so that they were on the cottage floor together. He took both of her hands in both of his, and he pressed them, knuckles down, into the worn wood of the cottage floor, as if to anchor them there. "You did not make the wrong choice," he said. "You made the only choice you could make with the information you had. You believed the note because you had no reason not to. You loved me enough to disappear into a snowstorm rather than risk my life. That is not a thing a person apologizes for. That is a thing a person is honored for. Do you understand me? Valoran, do you understand me?" She nodded because she could not speak. "And I am the one who failed you. I let an enemy I had not yet identified slip a note under your door inside the most warded wing of my own castle. I did not protect you. I did not deserve your trust on that night. Whatever happened after, whatever you carried alone for 4 months, that was on me, not you. I will spend the rest of our reign making it right. Starting tonight." The tears she had refused herself for 4 months came now, all at once, and she could not stop them. He gathered her into his arms. He drew her in slowly, carefully, the way a man draws a wounded bird into his hands, and he settled her against his chest with her head tucked under his chin, and he held her while she shook against him. His own tears, when they came, were silent. She felt them land in her hair. They stayed like that for a long time. At last, when her breathing had steadied, she lifted her head. "Tell me something," she whispered. Anything? Did you know? The night of the affirmation? When you walked across the hall to me? Did you know what I was?" He shook his head slowly. "No, my love. I knew only that the bond had ignited the moment I felt it. I did not know about your line. I did not know about your mother. I did not even know your name." His mouth softened. "I knew only that the shape of every other thing in the world had suddenly become wrong, and the only right thing was a girl in a gray dress against the western wall. I would have walked across that hall if you had been a beggar at the gates. The bond does not care about blood. Then what? What am I to it? Why 11 years, Valoran? Why 11 years of you not seeing me, and then the affirmation, and the bond opening like a struck match?" He hesitated. "I have a guess," he said carefully. "I am not certain, but Astarin and I spoke about it for many nights after you disappeared. And what we believe is this: the Crescent Line was hunted to near extinction. Your mother was the last full blood. You are half. The seeing in you, and any other gifts of the line, may have been bound when you were a child, sealed away to keep you alive. The priestesses who hid you at the temple may have done it. They would have known how. A child with the seeing is too easy to find. A child without it can disappear into a kitchen and be invisible for 11 years. Sifreni went very still. They sealed me. I think so. Yes. And the seal broke? Something broke it. Perhaps the bond itself. Perhaps the pendant. Against your skin. After enough years. Perhaps the will of the Pale Mother. I do not know. I know only that on the night of the affirmation, you were no longer hidden. The bond found you because for the first time in 11 years, you were findable." She thought of the moment in the cottage, the seeing, the arrow through the slit in the mask, the way her hands had known a longbow they had never held, the small lights at her fingertips. "It is still breaking," she whispered. "The seal. I can feel it loosening. There is more inside me than the seeing, Valoran. There is something else. It came up through me tonight along with the rest. I do not know what it is yet. Then we will find out together." She looked up at him. "Valoran, there is something else you should know. Tell me." "The masked figure at my window, the one with my mother's pendant. They knew about the Crescent Line. They knew before I did. They have been hunting my mother's blood for longer than we have been alive. The note that drove me out of the castle was written by someone who was not just trying to remove me. They were trying to destroy the line. There is someone, somewhere in your council, or close to it, who has known about the Crescent for decades and has been waiting for one of us to surface." His face hardened. "I had reached the same conclusion," he said. Vask has been working a list for 4 months. How long is the list? 3 names. Tell me. He took a slow breath. Holst Ardenholt, Lady Veska's father. He has the motive, the reach, and the resources. We have not been able to prove it. That is one. Sarek of the High Lore Keepers, the man who oversaw my affirmation. He has access to the warded wings. He has an old grievance against my father from before I was born. He is the most likely to have placed the note. That is 2. Valoran hesitated. The third is harder. Vask believes it points towards someone close to me, closer than I want it to point. I have not let him pursue it. We have been at odds about it for 2 months. His jaw tightened. I do not yet know who walked into my warded wing and slipped a death warrant under your door, my love. I only know that whoever did it is someone the wards considered family. She was quiet for a long moment. Then we find them. Together. As carefully as we can. His shoulders sagged, as if a weight he had been carrying alone for 2 months had lifted by exactly half. Yes, he said. Together. A heavy knock at the cottage door made them both look up. Vask's voice came through the wood, tense. Tight in a way Sifrena had not heard from him before. Majesty, forgive the intrusion. A rider from the capital has come down the south road. He has been riding for 2 days without rest. He brings a message that cannot wait. Valoran rose. He helped Sifreni to her feet. He did not let go of her hand. Send him in. The door opened. The rider who stepped into the cottage was scarcely able to stand. He was a young man in the king's livery, and the livery was streaked white with road salt and dark with dried mud. He went to one knee the moment he was inside. Majesty, I bring word from the capital. 2 nights ago, after you rode out, the Lord Holst Ardenholt was found dead in his chambers. Poisoned. The same compound used in the cordial brought to your private study on the night of the affirmation. Sifreni's hand tightened in the king's. The Lord Sarek of the High Lore Keepers, the writer continued, was found dead the following morning, hanged in his own library, made to look like remorse. Valoran went very still. Whoever has been working against us, the writer said, is cleaning house, Majesty. They are killing the men we suspected. They are killing them before we can question them. Someone is making sure that when this conspiracy is finally pulled into the light, there will be no one left to speak its true author's name. The fire cracked. Valoran turned slowly to look at Sifreni. His amber eyes had gone hard as struck flint. Whoever is behind this is not finished, he said quietly. They have removed the men who could betray them. Now they will move to take the throne while I am out of the capital. Then we ride, Sifreni whispered. Then we ride. He turned to the rider. You said 2 days. So the deaths happened the day after I rode for Hollowmere. They moved within hours of my leaving the city. Whoever they are, they were waiting for it. Yes, Majesty. My sister. The rider hesitated. Princess Asterin was in the capital when the deaths began, my lord. She is the one who sent me. She intended to ride out and meet you on the road, to bring you the news in person, but the city had begun to turn by midday. The criers were already shouting that a regent had been named. She sent me ahead and stayed to hold what she could. By now I cannot say whether she is still free or whether they have taken her. The king's face did not change, but Sifreni felt a small tight pulse through the bond, half hope, half something else. Then she is either riding into a trap, he said, or she is riding to spring one. We will know which when we get there. He took Sifreni's hand again. My love, he said. Whatever is waiting for us in Ashenvale, we walk into it side by side. Do you understand me? Yes. Good. Then sleep, if you can. We ride at the 2nd hour after midnight. The capital is 2 days away if we kill the horses, and we will. They left Hollowmere 2 hours before dawn. The king had wanted to leave at midnight. Vask had refused him on practical grounds. The wounded needed tending. The dead needed accounting for. The village needed a sworn promise of crown protection before the column rode out. And for once in his life, Valoran had bent to a second's judgment without argument. He had spent the intervening hours sitting on the bench in Mother Indra's cottage with Sifreni tucked against his side, his arm heavy across her shoulders, his breathing slow and even at her ear. He had not slept. Neither had she. They had spoken in low voices about everything and nothing, and somewhere in the long, quiet middle of the night, Sifreni had understood that this was the gift the bond gave the bonded. Not passion, though that was there, not desire, though that was there too. The gift was simply the right to fill in the empty hours of another person with the ordinary furniture of your own life. Mother Indra had come back from the Smiths at the second hour after midnight. She had stopped just inside the doorway and looked at the two of them on the bench. The king with his head bent against Sifreni's, Sifreni with her cheek resting against his collarbone, and had made a small sound that was the sound of an old woman who had spent 40 years preparing for a grief. She would not, after all, have to suffer. "You will take her," Mother Indra had said to the king, "and you will keep her, and you will not let her out of your sight again until the both of you are old. I swear it on the Iron Crown." "That is good, because if you fail her, Soldier King, I will track you across 3 kingdoms with my sister's bow, and I am not so old that I cannot still aim straight." Valoran had inclined his head. His mouth had almost smiled. "I have been warned by worse women, Mother, none more rightly." Now they rode. Sifreni had been given a small bay mare from the king's column, a gentle-mouthed creature who did not seem to mind that her rider had only ridden farm donkeys before tonight. She rode at the king's left, with Vask on his right, with 12 wolves of the personal guard ahead and 12 behind. The road was rough and narrow for the first stretch as they wound out of the hill country, and the column moved at the controlled, ground-eating pace that wolf cavalry preferred when speed mattered more than horseflesh. They rode in silence for the first hour. Sifreni. She turned her head. Valoran was watching her, the iron crown ring on its chain glinting at his throat in the lantern light. He had bathed and eaten and put on proper traveling leathers in Mother Indra's cottage, and the gauntness of his face had begun, very slightly, to recede. "My lord, I want to tell you something, while we have a quiet hour." "Yes." He looked at the road ahead for a long time. "The night of the affirmation," he said, "after Astaran left us in the corridor. After I sent for you to be moved into the warded wing. I stood in my study for 2 hours and I did nothing. I did not pace. I did not write. I did not eat. I stood at the window and I looked down at the courtyard and I tried to think of the speech I would make to the 7 houses in the morning, and I could not do it. None of it would come. My mind was empty." "That is a terrible feeling." "It was. But I want to tell you what was in the empty space, my love, because I have never told anyone and I want you to know." She waited. "The empty space," he said quietly, "was full of you. Not your face, exactly. I had only just learned your face. The empty space was full of every corridor you had walked in my castle for 11 years that I had not seen you in. I stood at that window, and I started to remember things. Sifreni, small things. A girl in a gray dress on the back stairs when I was 19, who I had passed without looking down. A small dark head bent over a basin in the scullery the morning of my coronation, who I had walked past on my way to be crowned. A pair of hands setting a pitcher of water at my elbow at the solstice feast 2 winters ago, and the way the hands had trembled when I almost touched them, and how I had not even looked up. I remembered 11 years of you, all of it at once. Hours and hours of moments where the bond had been reaching for you, and I had not been able to feel it because something in you was sealed shut, and the bond had been left to cry into a hallway alone. His voice had gone very low. Sifreni could not look at him. "I stood at that window," he said, "and I wept. I had been within arm's reach of you for 11 years and had not known what I was passing. And if the bond had not finally broken its seal that night, I would have stood at the altar in the morning and sworn myself to a woman I did not love, and you would have served wine at the wedding, and we would have died at our separate ages, without ever knowing what we had been. The bond saved me from that world by hours." He paused. "And then 4 hours later, you were gone." Safreni reached across the gap between their horses and laid her hand over his on the reins. He turned his hand under hers and laced their fingers together. "I am here," she said. "I am here now. I am not gone. You are not gone. And every corridor I walked alone in your castle for 11 years, Valoran, listen to me. Every one of them was a corridor where I was waiting. I did not know I was waiting. I would have sworn to the Pale Mother that I had made my peace with a quiet life, but I was waiting. And the waiting was not wasted, my lord, because the bond was wrapping itself a little tighter every year, and when it broke open in your throne hall, it broke open with 11 years' worth of weight behind it. We did not lose those years. We banked them. They are inside us now." Valoran turned his face away from her. For a moment she thought she had said the wrong thing. Then she saw his shoulders shake just once and understood that she had said the right thing, and that the right thing had hurt him for a heartbeat in the way that a true thing always hurts. "My love," he said hoarsely, "I do not deserve you. You will spend the rest of our lives trying to. That is the deal." This time his mouth did smile. They rode for another hour without speaking. The sky was beginning to gray at the eastern edge. Valoran spoke again, very quietly. "Tell me about the dreams." She turned her head sharply. "How do you—" "I had them too." Her breath caught. "I had them too, Safreni. Every night since you left, I would dream of you. I would dream that I had walked into a small cottage with herbs hanging from the rafters, and you would be standing at a table grinding something with a stone pestle, and you would not turn around. I would speak your name. You would not hear me. I would try to cross the room to you, and the floor would tilt, and I would wake with my chest tearing itself open. Every night, my love, for 4 months. Tell me you had them too." Safreni's eyes filled. "I had them," she whispered. "Every night. You were always at the cottage door. You would knock, and I would call out that it was open, and you would not hear me. Your face was so thin. I would wake and lie in the loft and put my hand against my chest where the bond was, and I would think, 'He is calling to me. He is calling to me,' and I cannot answer. You answered, my love. The bond carried it. I felt you answering every night. It was the only thing that kept me on my feet." Valoran. "Yes." "Stop the column." He turned in the saddle. "What?" "Stop the column, just for a moment. I am about to fall off this horse, and I do not want to do it in front of 24 wolves of the King's Guard." Valoran raised his hand. The column halted in the silver dawnlight. Vask glanced back, took in the king's face and the queen's tear-tracked one, and silently turned his own horse around to ride 20 paces ahead. The guards followed his lead. The king dismounted in one fluid motion. He came to her stirrup and lifted her down, and she came down into his arms. He did not kiss her at first. He held her face in his hands and looked at her, with the slow, desperate attention of a man trying to memorize the survival of a thing he had been mourning. His thumb brushed under her wet eye. Then he kissed her. It was not a king's kiss, formal and witnessed. This was the kiss of a man who had been starving in a forest for 4 months, and the warmth of her mouth was the first hot food he had been allowed in all that time. He kissed her slowly. The bond inside Safreni, which had been a hum and a pull and a blade by turns, surged into a full, bright flame, and she felt his emotions wash through it. The grief of those 4 months, the fury, the wild relief of last night. And, beneath all of it, a tenderness so vast that her knees gave out, and only his arm at her back kept her upright. When he finally lifted his head, he pressed his forehead to hers and breathed her in. "My queen." "Not yet." "My queen," he repeated, and there was no argument in his voice, only fact. We will do the formal claiming and the binding ceremony in the cathedral when we have peace. But you have been my queen since you walked into a throne hall in a gray dress, and you will be my queen if every house in Ashenvale calls down war on us for it. Do you understand me? I understand. Good. He lifted her back into the saddle as if she weighed nothing. He swung up onto his own horse. He raised his hand to Vask. The column moved on. They rode for 2 days. They rode through dawn and noon and dusk, changing horses at every loyal holding, sleeping in their saddles when they had to. They rode through the long valley road and across the great stone bridge at Ardenmere on the morning of the 3rd day. And as they came down into the broad bowl that held the capital city of Ashenvale, the king reined his horse to a sudden halt at the crest of the last ridge. "Pale Mother," Vask said softly. Sifreni looked. The capital lay spread out below them in the late afternoon light. The city walls, the great market square, the 7 spires of the cathedral, the high keep of the royal castle on its black stone hill at the heart of it all. A column of gray smoke was rising from the keep, not from a chimney, not from a kitchen fire, from the high tower of the eastern wing, the wing that housed the council hall, where the 7 noble houses met to advise the king. The royal banner was no longer flying from the central spire. In its place, white on black, a banner Sifreni had never seen before snapped in the wind, a gauntleted hand closing over a wolf's throat. Velarin's face had gone the color of cold iron. "Whose sigil?" Sifreni whispered. "No one's." Vask's voice was tight. "That is no house's banner, Majesty. That is a war banner. Someone has called for blood claim on the throne." The king closed his eyes. When he opened them, the gold had risen so high in them that Sifreni could see no gray at all. "Then we ride," he said. They did not ride straight through the main gate. Vask, who had spent his life solving the problem of how to put a wolf into a place where the wolf was not wanted, brought the column down off the ridge and along a dry creek bed that skirted the city walls to the southeast. There was a postern there, a small iron-bound door used by woodcutters and tax collectors, and almost no one else. And the gate warden knew Vask's face. The gate warden also knew, the moment the column came around the bend, that something very wrong was happening inside the walls. He opened the postern without being asked. He did not speak. He pressed 3 fingers to his heart in the old salute as the king rode past, and Sifreni saw that the man was weeping silently. "How bad?" Vask said, low, as he reined in beside the warden. "They came down from the keep at the 2nd hour after dawn." The warden whispered. "Soldiers in full plate, faceplates down. They went house to house in the inner ring. They took 37 souls, my lord. The king's own household. The seamstress who has dressed him since he was a boy. The cook. The old nurse. The librarian. Every face he has known and trusted. They have them in the great hall of the keep. There is to be a public execution at sundown. The criers are already going through the streets." The warden's voice cracked. "And they have already begun. At midday they hanged 17 of the household from the gatehouse wall. To prove they would do it, the other 20 are kept for the sundown ceremony. Each hour more are killed unless the city accepts the regency." "On what charge?" "Treason against the regent." The king's head came up. "There is no regent. There is now, Majesty. The Princess Asterin has been forced to it. She was in the city when it turned. She tried to rally what guards remained loyal, but the keep had already been seized by mercenaries who had been quietly placed in the city for weeks. They took the keep on the same night the deaths happened. The princess held the lower city for a day. She was taken at the gates of the keep when she rode there to demand an accounting. They did not kill her. They told the criers she had declared herself regent, and they have been using her face to legitimize it ever since." The warden's mouth worked. "She is in the keep, my lord, as a hostage. The story they are telling the city is that she has taken charge in your absence. The truth is that someone else has the throne, and your sister is being used to legitimize it." Sifreni and Velaran exchanged a look. Through the bond, she felt his fierce, wordless relief. His sister was not his enemy. His sister was a captive. Who is on the throne then? Vask said. That is the strange thing, my lord. No one knows. The criers will not name them. The mercenaries call them only the regent. There is a figure in pale lacquered armor who has been seen on the dais. A wolf skull mask, black cloak. The figure does not speak in public. It only listens. The princess, when she has been seen, speaks for it. Mercenaries, Vask said softly. Someone has been quietly buying a private guard, probably for years. Princess Asterin opposed the affirmation match for political reasons. Whoever this is, they used her opposition as cover. They let the realm think this was her coup, so that when it failed, she would be the one to fall. And then, they would step out from behind her, Valoran said grimly. Onto a throne already cleared of suspects. The 37 hostages, 17 already dead at the gatehouse, 20 still kneeling in the great hall, waiting for sundown, the seamstress, the cook, the old nurse, the librarian, the woman who had taught a hollow-cheeked orphan girl to read. Valoran, Sifreni whispered. The cook is the woman who took me in when I came to the castle at 7. The librarian is the housekeeper. If they are still alive, they are in that hall. If they are not, they are on the gatehouse wall. They are the only mothers I have ever known besides Mother Indra. Valoran's hand closed over hers on the reins. His jaw was set, and the gold in his eyes had hardened into something cold enough to cut. The 20 in that hall will live. Everyone. I swear it on the Iron Crown, my love. We will pull them out before the sun touches the western wall, and the 17 at the gatehouse will be brought down with full honors before this night is finished, and every soul who put a rope around their necks will answer to me before the next moon. Vask. Majesty. Get me a man inside the keep. Anyone. Any servant. Any guard. Any cook's boy. I need to know how many men this regent has under direct command, and which of the 7 houses have declared with them, and which ones have declared against. I cannot ride into the keep blind. It will be done. Give me an hour. You have less than that. Sundown is in 3. The column moved on into a small private inn in the southeast quarter, where the king kept rooms that almost no one knew about. The innkeeper was a woman named Pesh, a former member of the king's household guard who had retired 10 years ago after a knife to the knee, and she opened the back door before Valoran had finished knocking. She bowed deep. She did not ask questions. She put them in the inn's largest private chamber, fed them, brought them water for washing, and posted her own son at the door with a crossbow. Valoran would not sit down. He paced the chamber like a wolf at the bars of a cage. He had taken off his cloak. The iron crown ring glinted at his throat. This has been planned for years, he said. Years, Sifreni. The affirmation, the Ardenholt match, the crescent line. They have been working all of these threads at once. They have been waiting for me to slip. And the moment I gave them the opening, the moment I walked off the dais, they pulled. Valoran, Hadric. He turned. The man who brought the cordial. On the first night. Was he ever investigated? Yes. Vask questioned him for 2 days. He did not poison the cup himself. The cup was already on the tray when it reached him from the wine steward's chamber. The wine steward was killed in his own bed the same night. Before we could question him. Hadric was cleared. He has been guarding the door of my study every night since you disappeared, in penance for a thing that was not his fault. She nodded, satisfied. The thread closed. My love, he said hoarsely, I keep making you carry my anger for me. I will be steadier in a moment. Be as angry as you need to be. I am not made of glass. You are made of better things than glass. He stopped pacing. He came to her at the bed and knelt on one knee in front of her. Sifren, there is something I need to ask you, and I am asking it as your mate, not as your king. Ask. When we go into the keep, I want you to stay here, with Pesh, with 4 of my best guards. The keep is going to be ugly, my love. There will be fighting in the halls. There will be killing. I have done this kind of work before. You have not. And there is something this regent wants from you that I cannot let them have. If they take you, they will use you to break the bond inside me. They will hurt you in front of me, and the realm will not survive what I become. I am asking you to stay here, and let me come back to you. Sophrene looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. No, my love. Sophrene. No. Listen to me. Last night, in Mother Indra's cottage, when the masked men came through the door, what did the seeing show me? It showed me the gaps in their armor. It showed me where to put the arrow. The seeing is not a parlor trick. It is a weapon. It is the weapon the crescent line was hunted for. And whoever sits on that throne does not know I have it yet. They think I am still the sealed kitchen girl from the throne hall. If I walk into that keep beside you, I will see things they cannot hide from me. I will see who in their circle is loyal to them and who is loyal to you. I will see, the moment their face turns to mine, what they actually are. His eyes closed. His shoulders went very still. My love. You said we would face whatever came through the seal together. You said it last night. I am holding you to it tonight. A long, long silence. All right, he said. All right, my love, you come. Vask returned 10 minutes later, precious. He had a young potboy from the keep's kitchens with him, a thin, terrified boy of perhaps 13, who had been smuggled out under a load of empty sacks. Vask sat him down on a stool and gave him a cup of warm broth and waited. How many soldiers does the regent command in the keep itself? 80, the boy whispered. Maybe. They came in 2 nights ago. They are not the king's wolves. They are men in plain plate. No house sigils. They carry the gauntlet and throat banner. And the king's own personal guard? The ones who were stationed in the keep? Confined, my lord. They were locked in their barracks before they could mount any defense. They have not been killed. The regent did not want to kill the king's wolves outright. They are being kept as a card. And the 7 houses. 3 have ridden out for their own lands, my lord. They want no part of any of it. 2 have sent representatives to the keep, but have not formally declared. The Ardenholt house is in mourning. Their lord was buried this morning. And the 7th? The Kale line, my lord. They have declared for the king. Loudly. They have closed their gates. The regent has not yet moved against them. Valoran exhaled slowly. Old Hassan Kale. Bless him. Majesty, Vask said. 80 mercenaries inside the keep. Walls we know better than they do. The king's own 30 wolves locked in a barracks waiting to be freed. The Kale line across the river ready to ride if we call them. And a queen with the crescent seeing. He paused. I have worked with worse odds. What is the plan? The plan, Majesty, is that we go in through the kitchens, the same way we always went in when we were boys. A flicker of something almost like a smile crossed Valoran's mouth. Pesh, he said. Send a runner to the Kale Keep. Tell Hassan the king is in the city. Tell him to ride at sundown. Tell him to take the river gate and to push toward the keep, not into it. He is to draw the regent's reserves into the lower city while we go up through the cellars. At once, Majesty. Vask. The king's wolves in the barracks. How long to free them once we are inside? 10 minutes if we have a key. 3 if we do not, and we are willing to lose the doors. Lose the doors? The king turned to Sophrene. My love, the seeing. Is it always with you now? Or does it come and go? It comes when there is danger. I do not know how to call it on purpose. Last night it came up through me like a tide. Then we will trust the tide. Stay at my elbow inside the keep. Do not stray more than a sword's length from me. If the seeing shows you anything at all, speak it aloud, even if it makes no sense. I will. And Sophrene, when we reach the Great Hall? Yes. Whoever sits on that throne will speak before they move. They have been waiting too long not to. The seeing will tell you what they are. I need to know. Before I take their head. I will know, Sophrene said quietly, and I will tell you. He kissed her forehead. He held her there for a long moment. All right, Pesh. Bring me Vask's spare blade. Sefreni. Take this. He unhooked the iron crown ring from his throat and placed the chain around her neck himself. You keep this. If anything happens to me in there, you take it to Hassan Kale, and you raise the realm under it. Promise me. Valoran. Promise me. I promise. He kissed her once on the mouth, hard. Then he stood and pulled his cloak back around his shoulders and walked to the door. The sun was 55 minutes from the western wall. They went up through the cellars. Pesh led them through 3 back alleys, down a pair of cellar stairs nobody used, along a tunnel that smelled of old wine and damp stone, and up a narrow service stair that Sefreni recognized only when they came out, blinking, into the back corridor of the keep's kitchens. 2 scullions saw them come up out of the cellar door, took one look at the king's face, and silently set down their pots and bowed. Stay where you are, Valoran murmured to them as he passed. Do not run, do not speak. You will be safe. The corridor outside the kitchens was where they killed the first guard. He was a mercenary. Plain plate, no sigil, the gauntlet and throat painted in white on his left pauldron. He turned toward them as they came around the corner. He had time to begin to draw breath. Vask put a knife into the side of his neck before the breath fully arrived. The man went down without a clatter. 2 more mercenaries at the next turn went the same way, fast and silent, and Sefreni, who had thought, an hour ago, that she would not be able to bear another killing, found herself watching with the cold, clear focus of a woman who had a warden's words still ringing in her ears. Each hour, more are killed unless the city accepts the regency. The seeing rose in her with each turn of the corridor. It was easier this time. As if the door it had come through last night was no longer fully closed, she could feel, before they rounded each corner, the rough position of every armored body in the next stretch of hallway. She murmured the count to Vask each time. 2 ahead, 1 to the left, 3 at the next door. None for the next 100 paces. He used the information without hesitation. They reached the wolf barracks at 9 minutes after the agreed time. The doors were heavy oak banded in iron. 2 mercenaries guarded them. Vask and one of the king's wolves took them both without sound. Then Vask stepped back, raised his foot, and kicked the door at the lock with the full weight of his hip behind it. The wood groaned. He kicked again. The lock plate tore free of the frame, and the doors crashed open. The king's 30 wolves came up off their barrack floor in a single motion. They had been waiting for 2 nights. When they saw their king in the doorway, the senior captain, a heavy-set woman with a graying braid, fell to one knee in the rushes without a word. Majesty. On your feet, Captain Veth. Arm yourselves. We are taking the Great Hall. Yes, Majesty. It took less than 2 minutes. The king's wolves armed themselves with the practiced silence of soldiers who had drilled together for 10 years, and when they stepped out of the barracks and into the corridor, the king's column had gone from 26 to 56, and the keep had become a different mathematical proposition entirely. They moved up through the servants' stair, up past the 2nd floor, up past the 3rd, up to the wide, torch-lit corridor that led to the great double doors of the keep's central chamber. The doors were closed. 6 mercenaries stood across them with their pikes lowered. From inside the hall, faintly, came a woman's voice, calm, controlled. Princess Asterin. And so until my brother returns and reclaims his seat, I have agreed to hold the realm steady. I do this not for any house's gain. I do this. Her voice caught for half a second. Sefreni, listening through the doors, heard the catch and understood it. Asterin was reading from a script she had not written. Valoran's eyes burned gold in the torchlight. Captain Veth, he said quietly. The doors. Captain Veth raised her hand. The king's wolves moved. It was a brief, ugly business in the corridor. The pikes were lowered, but pikes are slow at close range, and the king's wolves were not slow. 20 heartbeats later, the 6 mercenaries were down, and Vask was at the doors with his shoulder against them. Sefreni reached out and stopped him with a hand on his arm. Wait. He turned. So did Valoran. My love? The seeing had risen in her again, stronger than in the corridor, almost blinding. She could see, through the doors as if they were not there, the entire great hall laid out in shapes and pressures. The hostages along the eastern wall, kneeling, hands bound, the 20 who remained. The other 17 had hung from the gatehouse wall since midday, and Sefreni forced the thought aside before it could undo her. The mercenaries at the foot of the dais, 12, in 2 rows of 6. The 2 of the 7 houses' representatives, standing well back along the southern wall, neither armed nor armored. Princess Asterin standing at the foot of the iron throne, iron gray robes rumpled, a mercenary blade resting at the small of her back, where the hostages could not see it. And on the throne itself, a figure, pale lacquered armor, a wolf skull mask carved finer than the one at Sefreni's window, a black cloak around the shoulders, a gloved hand resting on the iron arm of the throne as if it had been resting there for a very long time. Valoran, she whispered. Astarin is being held at sword point. She is reading from a script. The figure on the throne is the regent. She is the prisoner, not the captor. He let out a long breath. Some terrible thing inside him eased. And the figure? The mask, the pale lacquer, the carving. It is the same lineage of mask as the one at my window, and as the ones at Hollowmere. The masked figures who have been hunting the Crescent Line are not Astarins. They are the regents. Astarin has been used, Valoran. She has been made the face of a thing she is now a captive of. Vask let out a long breath. Pale Mother, the plan has changed. The plan has not changed, the king said. We open the doors, we free the hostages, we free my sister. We unmask the regent. And whoever is under that mask answers for every one of these 4 months. Captain Veth, the hostages are along the eastern wall. The moment those doors come open, you take half your wolves down that wall. Free as many as you can in the first 10 heartbeats. Vask, you take Astarin. The mercenary at her back goes down first. She is to be given a blade as soon as her hands are free. She will know what to do with it. I take the throne. Yes, Majesty. And Sefreni. Yes. Stay at my elbow. The seeing speaks first, then the blade. He turned to the doors. He did not signal Vask. He did not need to. He stepped forward and put his own shoulder to the right door and shoved, and the doors of the great hall of Ashenvale swung inward with a sound like the sky being pried open. The hall fell silent. Astarin turned. The mercenaries turned. The 2 house representatives along the southern wall flinched back. The hostages along the eastern wall, the housekeeper among them, the cook, an old man who must have been the keeper of the king's library, began raggedly to weep. The figure on the iron throne did not turn. It tilted its head. Just that. A slow, considering tilt of the wolf skull mask, the way a hawk tilts its head at a small movement on the ground. Brother, Asterin breathed. Valoran, do not believe what they have said in the city. I did not. I know, sister. I know. The mercenaries at the foot of the dais drew their swords. The mercenary behind Asterin began to move his blade to her throat. He never finished the motion. Vask's knife took him through the wrist before his arm had completed its arc, and a second knife, thrown from across the hall, took him through the throat. Astarin dropped to the marble. Vask was beside her in 3 strides, cutting the rope that bound her hands. The figure on the throne, with the same unhurried tilt of the mask, raised one gloved finger. The seeing, cracked all the way open now, showed Sefreni what the figure on the throne had not been able to hide. 20 crossbows came up along the upper gallery of the great hall, where heavy banners had hidden them, and every single one of them was aimed at her. Valoran, she gasped. The gallery. But there was no time to point. There was no time to dodge. There was no time for anything except the thing that had been pressing against the inside of her rib since the night of the affirmation, the thing that had begun in Mother Indra's cottage, to come through. The first crossbow bolt left its string. The seeing showed Sophrene the trajectory before the bolt had crossed 2 feet of air. It showed her, in the same brilliant fraction of a second, the trajectories of the other 19 bolts that were coming behind it. It showed her that 3 of them would take Valoran in the back as he turned to shield her. It showed her that 2 would take Vask. It showed her that the rest would take her in the chest, the throat, the eyes, the belly. She could not stop 20 bolts. But the crescent line had not been hunted to near extinction for the seeing alone. The seeing was the candle in the doorway. The thing the crescent line had been hunted for was the thing behind the seeing, the thing that pressed against the seal in Sophrene's chest, the thing that, last night, with the small lights at her fingertips, had begun, very quietly, to come through. The seal broke. It did not break the way a wall breaks. It broke the way a held breath breaks, with relief. With an exhalation that had been waiting 20 years to be released. Sophrene felt it leave her in a single bright outward push, and the great hall of Ashenvale lit up around her with a soft, pale light that had no source, that came from nowhere, that simply was. The light her mother had carried. The light her mother's mother had carried. The light of a line older than the Iron Throne itself. The first crossbow bolt slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. As if the air around it had thickened to honey. The bolt drifted, almost gently, 3 feet from Sophrene's chest, and dropped to the marble floor with a small, clean sound. The other 19 did the same. 20 crossbow bolts, hanging in the air of the great hall like motes of dust in a sunbeam, then settling one by one to the marble. The hall went absolutely silent. The masked figure on the Iron Throne rose to her feet. Slowly, for the first time. "Oh," she said softly. The voice was a woman's voice. Old, almost amused. "Oh, so she has it. The full inheritance. After all." Sophrene could hear her own heartbeat. The pale light around her began slowly to steady, to draw inward, to settle along her skin like a second cloak. She took 1 step forward. "Valoran, the hostages, now, while she is looking at me." The king did not waste a heartbeat. "Veth. Move." Captain Veth's wolves were already moving. They peeled along the eastern wall, blades flashing, and the mercenaries assigned to the hostages, who had been so completely transfixed by the floating bolts that they had forgotten, briefly, that they had a job, went down in a series of fast, short, ugly engagements. The first hostage's bonds were cut at the count of 3. The 5th at the count of 7. The 20th at the count of 11. Sophrene kept walking forward up the center aisle of the hall, the pale light moving with her, and the masked woman on the dais kept her unhurried head tilted toward her, and behind her, Valoran walked 1 half step at her shoulder, with the gold burning so high in his eyes that he did not, any longer, look entirely human. "Take off the mask," Sophrene said. "In a moment, child. In a moment. Take it off." The masked woman paused. Then, slowly, she raised both hands and lifted the wolf skull mask away from her face. A collective intake of breath ran through the hall. The face beneath the mask was the face of an old woman, perhaps 60. Iron-colored hair pulled tightly back. Eyes the color of cold river stone. A face Sophrene had seen, twice, in the periphery of court receptions over the last 11 years. "Lady Mother Sane," Asterin whispered. The Lady Mother Sane, the hereditary keeper of the Pale Mother's Temple, the senior priestess of the realm, the woman who, 2 decades ago, had personally overseen the temple to which a runaway musician's wife had brought a dark-haired infant girl with a silver pendant around her neck. The woman who had been entrusted with sealing the crescent seeing inside that infant girl, to keep her alive. The woman, Sefreni understood now with a sick, cold clarity, who had spent the last 21 years searching for the seal she had set, so that she could break it from the outside and harvest what was inside. "You sealed me," Sefreni said. "I did, child. To keep me alive. To keep you findable. The priestesses you remember meant you well. I was not one of them. I let them think I was. I set the seal so that when the time was right, when the line had grown quiet enough that my interest in it would not be remarked upon, I could come and break it, and take what was inside, and end the crescent line forever in the only way it can be ended. Not with a knife, not with poison. Those have been tried. Your mother was killed with a knife, and the line lived on in you. The line is ended by absorption, by taking the seeing into another bloodline. Mine. Your gift, child, was meant to come to me tonight. On the throne I had prepared. In the moment of my coronation, the realm's magic in a new vessel." "You are mad," Valerin said softly. "I am the last priestess of the line that the Crescent betrayed 9 generations ago, Wolf King. My grandmother's grandmother was driven out of the temple when the Crescents were chosen as the realm's mate true sight. My family has waited 4 centuries for our turn. We have been patient. I would have had it tonight, but for one detail." "Which is?" The Lady Mother smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Your bond, Wolf King. I did not anticipate your bond. I had assured myself the Crescent Child would never come within 10 paces of you. I had used your sister's fear of bonds, the fear she had carried since your mother died of grief in your father's bed, to keep her useful. Astarin would never have suspected a priestess. Astarin believed, when I came to her with my concerns about your stability, that I came as a healer of the soul. She did not know that the politics she was helping me arrange were politics of my own making." Astarin had her face in her hands. Sefren could hear her weeping quietly. "And the bond," the Lady Mother continued, "broke through my seal from the inside. I had not thought a wolf bond could do that. I had thought my craft was finer than a 1,000-year-old wolf instinct." She inclined her head at Sefreni. "I was mistaken. I will not be mistaken again." "You will not have a chance to be mistaken again," Valeran said. He raised his blade. "Wait," Sefreni said. He stopped. She walked the last 6 paces to the foot of the dais alone. The pale light moved with her. "Lady Mother," she said, very gently, "I am going to give you what you spent your life looking for." The Lady Mother's eyes narrowed. "Child, I am going to give it to you. You wanted the seeing. Take it." She closed her eyes. The crescent seeing was not, in the end, a knife. It was not a weapon. It was attention. It was the gift of looking at another soul and seeing, without flinching, what that soul actually was. Her mother had been killed for this. Her aunt had hidden in a small village for 40 years to avoid being killed for it. Sefreni had walked corridors for 11 years with it sealed and bleeding inside her, calling silently to a king who could not hear it. She opened all of it. She opened it not toward herself, but outward, toward the woman on the dais. She looked at the Lady Mother sane. She looked at her with the full weight of the crescent line. 9 generations of women. Her mother on a road. Her aunt in a cottage. Her grandmother, whose name she did not even know, and her grandmother's grandmother. And back, and back, and back. Every crescent woman who had ever lived, adding her small portion of clear-eyed attention to the gaze that Sefreni now turned on the priestess on the iron throne. The Lady Mother Sane staggered. She had wanted the seeing. She had spent her life wanting it. She had imagined it as a tool she could pick up and use. She had not imagined what it would feel like to be seen by it. She had not imagined that the seeing, fully opened and turned outward, would be a mirror. She looked into the mirror. She saw, without any possibility of looking away, what she had become. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Her hands rose to her own face. Her knees buckled. She sat down, very slowly, on the iron throne she had stolen. She did not move again. Sefreni understood distantly what had happened. The seeing had not killed her. The seeing had only shown her all at once every choice she had made in the 4 centuries her family had spent waiting. The mind that had carried those choices could not carry the mirror of them. It had simply put itself down, the way a person puts down a weight too heavy to keep holding. The Lady Mother breathed. Her eyes were open. But the woman who had sat on the throne 10 heartbeats ago was no longer in the body that occupied it. She would live out her days in a quiet cell, neither asleep nor awake, and the realm would not have to choose what to do with her, because she had already chosen for herself. Sefreni lowered her hands. The pale light around her began to dim, not to vanish. She understood distantly that it would never vanish again, that she would carry it inside her forever now, to settle back into her bones, into the quiet place where the bond also lived. Astarin made a small choked sound. Valoran was at her side in 2 strides. His arm went around her waist. She had not realized she needed it until it was there. The hall around them was beginning to remember itself. The mercenaries dropping their weapons one by one. The housekeeper among the freed hostages running with shaking arms toward the king. Captain Veth's wolves moving to secure the gallery and the side doors. From below, faintly, the sound of horns. The Kale line had reached the river gate. The lower city was being taken back, street by street. The housekeeper reached them then. She did not curtsy, she did not stop. She walked straight into Sefreni and wrapped both arms around her and the king together, and she wept into Sefreni's hair, and she said over and over, "Child, child, child." Valoran turned in the embrace, without letting go of either woman, and looked at his sister. Astarin was on her knees on the marble. Her face was streaked. Her iron-gray robes were rumpled. She looked for the first time Sefreni had ever seen, like a woman who did not entirely know what she had done. "Valoran," Astarin whispered. "Brother, I did not know. She told me she wanted only stability. She told me the Crescent Witch would unbalance the realm. She told me you needed protection from a bond that had unhinged you. I believed her. Pale Mother, forgive me. I believed her." The king was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was not a king's voice. It was a brother's voice, and it was full of pain. "You believed her because you have been frightened of bonds since the day Mother died. You never spoke of it. You never let me speak of it. But I have known. I have always known. And so, when a priestess told you my bond was the cause of the realm's instability, it confirmed what you had already decided. She did not have to convince you. You convinced yourself. She only handed you the words." Astarin's face crumpled. "Yes. You will answer for it. There will be a public accounting. But you will live, sister. Because I love you. And because at the end you read her script with a blade at your back. And because, if the trial finds against you, the only person who can ask the realm to spare your life will be me, and I will. Do you understand?" Astarin nodded, weeping. "Vask, take her, gently, to her own rooms, not a cell, a guard at the door." Vask reached down with a gentleness that surprised Sefreni and helped Astarin to her feet. He did not bind her. He took her arm. He led her quietly out a side door of the hall. Valoran turned, with Sefreni still in his arm, to face the great hall. The freed servants, the guard, Captain Veth, the 2 house representatives, who had risen unsteadily from their corners, the whole long hall, whose floor was littered with 20 crossbow bolts that had drifted to it like fallen leaves. He raised his voice, a king's voice, this time full and ringing, and he said, "Behold your queen." They went to one knee, every one of them, with a sound like a single soft tide drawing back. The iron throne stood empty behind them. The Lady Mother Sane did not. But Sefreni did not look at her. She looked at the kneeling hall, and she looked at the king beside her, and she looked at the iron crown ring still on its chain at her own throat. My love, she whispered. Yes. There is one more thing the bond wants. I know. He drew her, very slowly, away from the housekeeper's embrace. He turned her to face him. He lowered his head and tilted his chin upward, baring his throat to her in the old gesture of a wolf offering himself to his mate, and Sophrene understood without being told what the bond was asking. She rose on her toes. She set her lips against the hard pulse of his throat. She closed her teeth gently into the skin there. The bond inside her opened all the way. She felt him pour into her. She felt herself pour into him. 11 years of corridors, 4 months of a forest, a throne hall, a western alcove, a poisoned cordial, a snow road, a cottage, an ant, a bow, a green, a great hall. Every moment of both of them, all at once, given to each other and accepted. The bond completed itself with a soft, warm click somewhere behind her ribs, and Valeren's whole body sagged against her with the relief of a man who had finally set down a weight he had been carrying since the day he was crowned. When she lifted her mouth from his throat, the small mark she had left there began, slowly, to silver. The mate mark, visible, permanent. A claim no priestess and no political treaty and no masked woman in a wolf skull would ever again be able to question. He pressed his forehead to hers and breathed out, slowly, for what felt like the first time in 4 months. My queen, my king. The hall was still kneeling. The sun had finally touched the western wall. From the lower city, a long, full-throated howl was rising. The wolves of the Kale line, at the river gate, calling the realm to its feet. The realm howled back. A year and a day later, on the first morning of the new spring, the Queen of Ashenvale gave birth to a daughter. It was not an easy birth. Mother Indra, who had been brought from Hollowmere months before and installed in her own apartments in the royal wing, sat on a stool at the head of the queen's bed for 16 hours and did not let go of her niece's hand. The king sat on the floor beside the stool. Kings of Ashenvale were not traditionally present at births, but the bond would not let him leave the room, and no one had the courage to ask him to, and he did not let go of his queen's other hand. When the child finally came, Dawn pale and squalling, with a soft fluff of dark hair and one tiny silver mark already faintly visible at the base of her left wrist, Mother Indra wept openly for the first time since the night of the affirmation. Lirain would have loved her, the old woman whispered. What name does she have, Aunt? Sophrene murmured, exhausted, her cheek against her husband's shoulder. That is yours to give. Sophrene looked up at Valeran. The king who had once been carved from stone, and then from grief, and then, in a small cottage in Hollowmere, from something humbler and warmer, looked down at the child in his queen's arms with an expression that Sophrene had only ever seen one other time. The night he had walked across a throne hall to find her in a western alcove. Lirain, he said softly, if it pleases you. It pleased her. The realm healed slowly, the way realms always heal. Princess Asterin was tried, found guilty of conspiracy and the abetting of treason, and sentenced to 5 years of confinement in the convent of the Pale Mother on the western coast. She wrote her brother once a season. He wrote back every time. Neither of them ever wrote about the night in the Great Hall. They wrote instead about the weather and the books they were reading, and, eventually, about the small, dark-haired niece who, at 14 months, had begun to walk straight up to total strangers in the courtyard and stare at them with the unmistakable, focused, unblinking attention of a crescent child. The seeing, Mother Indra said, would not be sealed in this one. The world had changed. She would grow into it as her foremothers had been meant to. The Lady Mother Sane lived out the rest of her days in a quiet cell at a fortified sanctum on the southern coast, far from the convent where the princess was confined. She was tended by priestesses who had not known what she had done and would not be told. She was gone within the year. The 7 houses settled, one by one. The Kale line was elevated. Hassan Kale himself was given the seat at the king's right hand on the small council. the seat that had once belonged to the High Lorekeeper, and he held it with a quiet dignity that surprised no one who had ridden behind his banners on the night of the river gate. The Ardenholt line, after a year of mourning and a year of negotiation, returned to council under a younger lord. Lady Vesca, who had at first refused to set foot in any room the new queen occupied, was eventually invited to a private supper at which the queen apologized formally and gently for the shape of the night of the affirmation. The two women sat together for 3 hours. Lady Vesca wept once, briefly, and Sefreni wept with her. They did not become friends, but they became, after enough time, the two women who had stood at the foot of the same dais on the same night, and who had decided, separately, that the realm was larger than any one consort's pride. Hadric returned to his post outside the king's study, gray and steady, and was given a small grant of land in his retirement 4 years later. Corvin Vask, the king's second, did not marry until he was 47. He married, in the end, a healer from the western coast who had cared for a confined princess and had written him quiet letters about the way the princess had begun, slowly, to mend. The princess was at his wedding. She danced with her brother for the first time in 5 years. The realm wept, quietly, into its wine. The crescent pendant, Sefreni's, and her mother's mother's, was placed in a small carved box on the queen's bedside table. She wore it on the holy days. The rest of the time she wore the iron crown ring on its chain, the one the king had pressed into her hands before they walked into the keep, and the small silver mark on the inside of her left wrist, where her husband had set his own mate mark on her on the night of the bond completion, faint and steady as a vein of moonlight under the skin. And on the night of the 3rd anniversary of the affirmation, the 3rd anniversary, that is, of the night an Alpha King had stopped a coronation ceremony and walked across a throne hall to a kitchen girl in a gray dress, Sefreni sat on the eastern terrace of the keep with her daughter asleep in her lap, and her aunt asleep in a chair beside her, and her husband's arm around her shoulders, and watched the moon come up over Ashenvale. The wolves of the realm, without anyone giving an order, lifted their voices. It was not a howl of grief. It was not a howl of war. It was the long, full-throated howl that wolves give only when the realm is whole. When the king and the queen are bonded, and the air is breathing, and the line is unbroken, and the pale mother is watching from her place above the iron throne and is, after a long winter, finally pleased. Velaran's hand tightened, very gently, around hers. "My heart," he said quietly. "My king." "From the first night to the last." "From the first night," Sefreni whispered. "To the last." The howl rose, and the realm howled back, and somewhere in the rafters of the keep, for the first time in a generation, there was no figure watching from the shadows. There would never be again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.